Hello and welcome to Classic Book Reviews with David. In this video I'll be discussing The King's Mistress. Here's a copy by Gillian Bagwell. In the United States it's known as The September Queen, but for the purposes of this video I'll call it The King's Mistress. So it's a historic novel and it's based on a true story. And in fact the way I found this book was I'm interested in genealogy. I found a distant relative called Clement Fisher. And his wife was called Jane Lane, and she had an amazing adventure which I'll tell you about in a moment. And it's that adventure that this novel is based on. So let's give you a bit of a history lesson. In 1649, Charles I, King of England, was executed. His son, who was in his late teens at the time and also called Charles, was spared. He was allowed to live. But a couple of years later, he decides to raise a rebellion against the forces of Oliver Cromwell, who'd beheaded his father. Unfortunately, this rebellion didn't work, and there was a battle called the Battle of Worcester, which Charles lost, the future Charles II lost. So he has to run, he has to escape England. There's a bounty on him. The parliamentarian forces under Oliver Cromwell want him dead. And they want his helpers, anyone who assists him, executed or imprisoned. So Charles needs to escape England somehow, and a plan is drawn up to get him to Bristol. As it happens, someone called Jane Lane, who was kind of in that vicinity where Charles was at the time, was going to Bristol. And the parliamentarians said that royalists and Catholics could only move within a boundary of 5 miles of their home, unless they had a pass. Funnily enough, or luckily enough for Jane, she had one of these passes because she was going to Bristol to see her cousin, who was pregnant and whose baby was due soon. So it was arranged that Jane's servant should in fact be the king in disguise. So that's what happened. The future Charles II disguised himself as a servant and went with Jane cross country. Now, Charles was 6'3" or 6'2", quite dark in complexion and really did stand out. And this made their travelling all the more difficult. And of course, there were soldiers everywhere looking for this very tall man and cue lots of adventures as they made their way across country and through towns. Jane's life was in danger as well, because if it was discovered that she was helping him, she'd be executed as well. So she was putting her life on the line to help the king. I love this book. It's a great mix of romance and adventure. Gillian Bagwell, the author, also does a great job of filling in gaps in the story. I mean, it's not like the story is written in its entirety anywhere. It's a historic, adventure that's been recorded in history, in a fragmentary form. There are lots of gaps where we just don't know what happened. And there's also the inevitable question of, were Charles and Jane lovers? Now, Charles was a very amorous man. He had a lot of illegitimate children over the years. He did like to sleep around. Did he sleep with Jane? Well, in this book, the answer is yes, and there are some rather raunchy scenes. It's a very good book. The characters are well delineated. The story, goes at a quick pace, and it's very tense as well at points, where they're stopped by soldiers and asked questions, and they have to, feign, they have to pretend they are, not the king and his helper. It's a great book, well worth reading. Another book, I'll just quickly digress. There was another book that writes about the future Charles II's escape from England, and that has Jane Lane in it as well, but it's more of a focus on the king, whereas this book focuses on Jane Lane. This book, The Royal Escape by Georgette Heyer, focuses more on the king, and Jane plays a small part in this story, or a smaller part in this story. I'm not keen on this book. I only made it about halfway through and then I gave up. But you may enjoy it. For me, this book The King's Mistress is far better. It's a really good book. And for that reason, if I can find my little Blackie the Blackboard, I'm giving The King's Mistress 5 stars. It's a great book, well worth reading. And that's it. So if you want to, you can subscribe to my channel. Please do. I'll be uploading videos probably at a rate of around once a week. And I hope to see you again soon. So, bye.